that's the problem. I say they gave it the same thing. It's like, that's the only thing we ever do. So is there any biases there?
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our city council meetings for Wednesday, January 22nd. We are going to start tonight with a Pledge of Allegiance by Matt Bigler.
Everybody could please stand, please? Yeah, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Matt. We're going to turn to city council comments and recognitions. Anything from, I've got two items, anything from council tonight? Okay, seeing none from council, I've got, so we're going to recognize tonight, we're going to take some time to recognize our Trails Committee. If you guys could come up, Tracy and your team, you want to come up here, and all of you, come on up here. Well, this is Tracy. Tracy doesn't like this. She doesn't like the recognition for what she did, as well as her whole team. But just a little bit of background. I want to read something about some of the statistics that they've done. But this is your Trails Committee. Tracy now is the chair on Friends of Harriman over the Trails Committee. Tell us who, just for, I know a couple of you, but I don't know all of you. So for all of us to.
And Short, and Josh might see my brain. This is Josh. We're going to use first names. This is Rainy. Matt.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, they've all been super. Goes to them. They're doing all the work.
I love it. And I think we were talking, this is when we created Friends of Harriman, I think this is what we envisioned, is turning this to residents that had passion in this area, be able to run with it and do more than we could. Really, like we talk, getting government out of the way, because we're not, and letting you guys do what you do. And Brandon started out, did an amazing job, kind of got things going, and Tracy, I know you stepped in when Brandon needed to step away. But just, there's some of the stats that Wendy kind of sent me that they've been. So the Trails Committee has organized over 350 hours from over 150 volunteers over the summer. They've built 6.5 miles of trails cleared, loose rocks, thick vegetation, helped staff repair many trail features, and helped plan a few public events on the trail system. I've been to a couple of those the night hike with the glow sticks was absolutely just a highlight of the year for us. So we just want to recognize you for what you've done, for all of you for the time you put in. Again, this is stuff that the city now doesn't have to do that's making a difference in the trails. And I think we're just getting started. If I'm not speaking out of place here, I think we're just getting started. So we just wanted to applaud you tonight for your efforts. We appreciate it. We just want you to know it doesn't go unseen and unnoticed, that it is being noticed and talked about and appreciated by all of us and the entire community. So thank you, and we just want to applaud you tonight. Tracy, you want to say anything, or any of you want to say anything? Quiet group. That's okay, you don't have to, so. I love it. Well, thank you.
Go use the trails. That's what we need, is people out on the trails enjoying them.
Tell your friends.
That makes all of our effort worth it, so.
Yep.
We're
I love it.
excited to get started doing trail work again in May, so.
I love it. Let's give them a round of applause if we could. Picture? Could we do a picture with all of you? Is that okay?
You might need 2 rows. Unless we want the lectern in it. Yeah, 2 rows, please. Yep, that works. All right, 1, 2, 3. Okay, that'll work.
And now our audience is gone. Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you, yes. Okay, we have one more recognition tonight, and he, again, also does not want to receive this recognition.
You're gonna
Which is
force
my-
it on them anyway?
Wendy, it's Wendy. I'm blaming Wendy, so got to find my email.
Wendy's fault, yeah.
Okay, tonight we are going to recognize our city manager, Nathan Cherpeski. So Nathan Nathan has now been with the city just shy of 4 years. And personally, but before I read what Wendy wanted to say, what this recognition said is, I think we speak for all of us on council when we appreciate your guidance, your leadership, your friendship. I think just the way you've conducted things and you're my only city manager I've worked with, right, on my side, and it's just, from day one, it's just been an amazing relationship, and your vision and steady leadership has just been, I've seen growth in you personally. It's funny, because I think when you came in, you were shy, right? I'm not saying you're still not the most outgoing, right? That's not your personality, right? We've talked about that, right? But
I'm an ambivert. I can be an extrovert when I have to be,
Right.
but I probably prefer not.
an ambivert, okay, I like it.
Welcome to the club.
But Nate, I've seen even, again, you came in with a pedigree and experience, but just the growth in you, and I think as a council, we've all grown together, and it's just been such a good formula. So now I'm going to read what came from, is this from you or is this ICMA? This is Wendy. We're going to say it's not Wendy. Wendy doesn't want credit for this. We are excited to celebrate Nathan Cherpeski for 25 years of service to local government. Nathan's journey in city management in Harriman started in South Jordan City in 1999 and detoured through California, Colorado, and Oregon. And we've all heard stories about all those. I know those areas very well because of the stories that you brought with those areas. Before returning back to Utah in 2021. Nathan is also a credentialed city manager through the International City Managers Association. This credentialing program recognizes professional local government managers who, through their education and experience, their adherence to high standards of integrity, and their commitment to lifelong learning and professional development, are deserving of the credential. We are grateful for his dedication to local government and the vast experience that he brings to Harriman. Congratulations on your 25-year service award. So.
I would have hidden the plaque better if I'd known Wendy was going to do that.
We know.
I was actually recognized in September in Pittsburgh, and they just sent the plaque like yesterday, and I was like, oh yeah, and then Wendy saw it today, and she said, I'm taking that.
That's what Wendy does best. Anybody else want to say anything?
I'll tell you that there's been a few times that we've been able to make decisions that I've been really glad in retrospect to look back and go, yes, that was a great decision. You were a great decision. So thank you for all you've brought to the city, and you fulfilled every hope and dream in why you were hired to be here. So thank you.
Yep, likewise.
Said it better.
It was not an easy process for us to go
Yeah,
through at the time.
rough.
It wasn't an easy decision to go as we went through that, without divulging too much. But we ended up with the right decision. And as difficult as some of us may be more than others, I really appreciate your steady hand and willingness to take on the project. And you, as I'll continue to remind you, there's at least one of us that warned you what you were getting into, whether you listened to it at the time or not. You were warned.
Right.
Thank you.
Hopefully you
I
don't
will
regret
agree,
it.
it was
Yes.
not an easy process.
I will
It's gonna
say,
be one of the highlights of Wendy's career.
I would say the
Making
more
it through it?
depressing moment is when you realize that you've done your career longer than you didn't in your life. There's this moment where you stare at that and you think, how did this happen? So,
We've got to talk about your comments, though, about aging. Every comment you've talked about this makes me feel,
He's buying a Corvette next week.
when he said he turned 50 and he's probably 2/3 of the way through his life, I'm like, oh, man.
just playing the statistics.
I know, but never felt the same sense, so. Okay, can we do a picture? Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
I didn't.
There was a vote on the last one.
I guess I can't stand off to the side.
We should make Todd and Wendy be in this one, too.
And then fix the placards that are missing.
Gotcha. Sure. They were driving me nuts as well.
All right, 1, 2. All right.
I just realized. Just make sure we don't have to do that again.
Okay, we will now move on to our public comment portion. At this time, audience members may bring any item within the city's purview to the city council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. Public comments for this meeting will also be conducted electronically. Any person interested in addressing the council may submit a comment by emailing recorder@harriman.org or by visiting harriman.org/agendas and minutes, where there's a link to fill out an online public comment form. Your statement will be incorporated into the public record. Any public comments tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to city council reports. We'll start tonight with Jared.
Nothing tonight. We've got benefits and comp committee starting in earnest on Thursday to drive the policies I've been telling you about.
Okay. Okay, Teddy?
We had a South Valley Chamber meeting this morning. I wasn't able to attend, but we did get some awesome economic insight from the Kim Gardner Institute emailed to us. I'll forward that to the rest of you. I know Sherry's got it as well, but there's some awesome data in there, and it highlights a lot of the things we're doing right as Salt Lake County and Utah. So, and then some holes that obviously we can fulfill. So.
Okay, thank you. Sherry?
Nope.
Nothing tonight. Okay, Steve?
Not tonight, thank you.
Oh my gosh, I wasn't ready. I'll just report quick. We had a league board meeting today. Again, nothing of significance today, just kind of prepped us on the legislation. I will say, talking to a few other board members and then talking to our representatives, if you guys, a couple of you were there, 3 of you were with Candace, met with her. I think there's going to be a lot of desire from the league board to just push back on housing bills and just say, enough. You know, let's hit pause. We're hearing the House has that, maybe not the Senate side, but the House side has some definite desires there to stop, to pause housing legislation. So it didn't come up today. Lieutenant Governor Henderson was at, Deidre was at the legislative, and she didn't bring up housing.
Nope.
She didn't bring up, that's not, their focus seems to be on energy and other ideas. But yeah, not, housing didn't come up at all today, which was a first for me, I think, in 3.5 years. So anyways, kind of the winds are changing a little bit, and hopefully that's gives us a reprieve out here. But we'll keep everybody updated on the legislative session that just started yesterday. That's really all I have. we'll move on to 8.1, presentation of the audited financial statements for the fiscal year ended June 30th. Kyle, who might add has also been in a tremendous addition, a tremendous hire.
Where's his plaque?
He's had a, we've given him a plaque.
Thank you. And nobody warned me what was involved when I got hired, but
I wasn't involved in that interview.
that's just a joke.
We knew better.
It's actually not this one. I don't have a presentation. Unfortunately, the audit partner had a miscommunication on when the council meeting was, so I'll be delivering a quick overview of the financials and then the audit findings that occurred. Just as of note, we did meet with the audit committee before the city council meeting, so they were apprised and they did get to speak with the audit partner. So this is more for the public. I'm sure all of you know, being on the council as long as you have. We are required by state law to do an audit of our financial statements every year. This has to occur within 6 months of the close of our fiscal year. It's government, so of course nothing can be fast. So our fiscal year ends June 30th. Our audit was completed December 31st. I am happy to report, and it's located in this little handout that's included with the major financial statements. We only had one compliance audit finding this year. That was related to exceeding budgeted expenditures in the police fund, specifically debt service. What had occurred is, as you know, the police department moved into a different lease space for their animal services operations. There was a delay in getting a reconciliation from the lessor between the two spaces, and I received it after the audit had started, and we ended up having to book some extra expense and pay some extra expense to the lessor. As I had mentioned to the audit committee when we discussed this, when we hire a new senior accountant, because we are currently short-staffed, I do want that person to just be over debt service, so they will be monitoring this more on a timely manner. So that, and it's a minor finding relative to other findings that the city could have. Just related to that, this pamphlet is what's called a single audit. So because we received more than $750,000 in federal money during the year, the auditor has to do some special testing to make sure we're compliant with the federal guidelines of our grants. Our major grant this year was we did purchase some land through the ACUP program, the federal military program. So that was included, but there were no findings related to our compliance with federal audit standards. And then finally, I do like to point out a couple places, especially as you as council might be interested in. In the financial statements, this wonderful thick book, which we don't have a lot of say on what we put on it. Pages 37 shows the assets for the major governmental funds, and in particular, there is a fund balance number towards the bottom, so it shows for each fund of the major funds how much we have available in fund balance. Of note, the general fund balance is a little over $8 million, which may sound like a lot, but our overall general fund balance, if you include police, is over $30 million. That equates to 35% of our expenses, and it actually is over what our fund balance policy requires. Our fund balance policy requires 3 months of expenses. So we're about $2 million over there. However, I will be discussing with you as a council, we do have an obligation related to our interfund loan that I may be requesting those funds to help cover. But we'll get to that because we need to modify the interfund loan that was used to purchase the Auto Mall property. So good news, but I've already spent it. The next page 38 shows revenues and expenditures for the major funds, so in particular the general fund, so it'll show you how much was spent during the year there. And then finally, to go over the water fund, since that has been a major concern and we went through the rate study this year. That's on page 41. I actually do have some good news on the water fund, and in particular, the number to look at is towards the bottom where it says unrestricted, so that's the funds that we would have available to spend on capital projects or other needs. They're not restricted or tied up in other ways. long story short is the way that the accounting had been done previously when we were capitalizing assets with our water rights. We were capitalizing them in one fund, but expending it in another fund, which creates a cash imbalance. So we were able to move $8 million from water rights over to water to alleviate that cash balance, which therefore increased the unrestricted fund balance. As I had mentioned to the audit committee, those numbers will be factored in when we do our analysis of where we're at with the rate increase. So I would anticipate all things being similar, and we're still staying with the plan that was put in place with the water rate study, that increase we will need for future years will be less. I haven't done the analysis to give you an idea of what that is, but that's what that would mean, because now we have more money for capital projects instead of having to bond 100% for all the capital projects that are needed. So with that, are there any questions for me?
I don't remember if you guys remember, about a little over a year ago, we actually went RFP'd out and got a new audit company, and this service has been very easy. His update, even talking to him today, meeting him, he seemed very confident in our systems and processes and with what Kyle's been doing. So it was a great report from the auditor itself, and I think that speaks volumes to what we have put in place and what we're going to put in place with the new software potentially. So it's awesome.
I don't have anything else. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. Okay, we will go on to 9.1. This is a public hearing regarding the issuance of not more than $20 million of sales and franchise tax revenue bonds and any potential economic impact that the improvements, facility, or property finance in whole or in part with the proceeds of said bonds may have on the private sector. Kyle, and this will include a public hearing tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. As you had mentioned, this is a public hearing for the proposed bonds that are to be issued in the future. I know you're well aware of this because we've been over it for multiple meetings, but for the public, I just want to go through a quick background on this. So first, why the bond is needed is we have entered into, as a city, a number of master development agreements and reimbursement agreements for infrastructure in the city. I've highlighted 4 of the major MDAs: Creek Ridge, Mountain Ridge, Hidden Oaks, and Olympia. There are 9 projects that we do need to complete soon, either because development's coming or in many cases the MDA actually specified when those needed to occur, and some of them have passed. So that's about $29 million of projects. Working with our financial advisors and working with our engineering department, we're proposing doing 2 bonds, so this is the first bond of 2. The main reason for that is we don't want to be sitting on this bond cash because that does create some issues with federal arbitrage, and we would end up having to make payments. Once again, here's the list of projects. The ones with asterisks are proposed to be included in this first bond. You see the major one is 6400 West improvements, working on that road. It does include the 138 South reimbursement for that road that's already open. We did already execute a reimbursement agreement for that. And once again, just going over the parameters resolution that was passed by the council in December. So the parameters resolution sets the maximums, which we as a city don't intend to meet these maximums, but they're put in to offer flexibility when we go to issue the bond. So the first one is maximum principal of $20 million. We're intending of issuing a bond around 17. Number of years to maturity is set at 30. We're intending on a 20-year bond. Sale price compared to principal of 98%, and then it does set a maximum interest rate of 6%. Talking with our financial advisor and underwriters, we won't be that high. Another thing that the council passed with the parameters resolution is it did set myself and the city manager as designated officers, and just to be clear, both of us have to be in agreement on that. And that's to select the bond underwriter or the bond purchaser, the method of sale, principal amounts, interest, terms, et cetera, and then any these are just minor error corrections that might need to occur with the documentation. Anything major, the whole process would have to start over again.
Kyle, what is your communication? What do you think the interest rates what are they anticipating it to be?
I've actually got a couple slides on that because I do want some input on the method of sale. So
I'll hold.
yes, so actually we're getting to that. So I wanted to just briefly go over, there's 3 ways the bonds can be issued. The first is a competitive sale, so that is where the bonds are placed in a public forum and then bids are received on purchasing the bonds. So this provides the city with the lowest interest rate. However, it does have the highest cost of issuance because you have to do an official statement, and then there's other costs associated with that. One thing is it's less flexible on terms. So our financial advisor says the minimum call would be 10 years. So it'd be 10 years before we could call these bonds. A negotiated sale. So this is what the city has historically done quite a few times in the past. So the city would engage an underwriter who would market the bonds to prospective buyers. Once 1 or 2 buyers are chosen, we would enter in negotiations on the terms of the bond. One negative thing with this is because the buyers that are chosen know there's only a couple of them, so they may not be as flexible on terms. However, it has worked for the city well in the past. We've done this quite a bit. And the final one is a direct purchase. So this would be our financial advisor would market the bonds to certain large financial institutions or banks, and they would purchase the bonds directly. So this would eliminate the need for an underwriter, or I call it the master salesperson, and a lot of the cost of issuance, because we wouldn't have to do an official statement. We would do a much lighter information on the bonds. So the lowest cost, that means in terms of cost of issuance, not interest rate, as we'll get to the next slide. Most flexibility on terms. So our financial advisor was saying we could even go as low as 1 to 2 years before they would be callable. It would have the highest interest rate, though, because of that flexibility we're getting. And the big question why I bring this up is the crystal ball that always seems to be on the fritz when I go to it. Will rates actually go down in the future? Because right now we are actually in a fairly high interest rate environment. So our financial advisor put this table together looking at a competitive and a direct. So competitive is that public forum, lowest interest, versus direct, where we would sell directly to a bank or financial institution. So as you can see on the interest rates, there's about a 0.6% difference, which equates to about an additional $80,000, $81,000 a year in debt service. And then our total principal and interest, as you can see, per year will be about $1.6 million. And the reason I bring this up is it does come back to if interest rates are going to fall, our financial advisor suggested it might be good looking at the direct option because if rates fall, we can immediately refinance and recoup the savings.
Plus, can we save some of the cost of the bond in itself? How much would that savings be? The difference between the cost of the direct versus the competitive?
It really would depend, but it's usually about 3% of the bond price is what we pay between the underwriter and then cost of issuance fees.
It's pretty substantial.
Yeah.
And so if something changed within that year or so, you'd save that cost.
And the financial advisor did factor those cost savings into these interest rates, because these are time value of money calculations looking at what that interest rate is in today's dollars versus looking out 20 years. So this isn't the coupon rate.
Okay.
The coupon rate on a competitive would be approximately 4.5% to 5% is kind of what we're looking at.
Okay.
Our financial advisor said if interest rates were to drop to 3% a year, which has happened in the past when we were in a lower interest rate environment, our annual payments would decrease $25,000, and then we would save about $1.2 million over the life of the bond.
Yeah, it's pretty substantial.
Yeah. So that's the conundrum: is are rates going to fall, and how much and when?
Your crystal ball says.
My crystal ball's been on the fritz. I mean, we've discussed this, that with sales tax right now, I'm budgeting off of vibes and not real good data, so. Because every time I think I have a handle on things, we get our next sales tax remittance, and it's not anything we were expecting, so.
What's the timing that needs to go to market?
We have a month or two. My goal was to have everything funded by June, where we've already advanced about 500,000. But as far as I'm aware, there's no real rush. We probably do need the money by summer, because I know there's a few of these projects that are going to start.
I'm gonna look to the finance people. Jared, Steve, any thoughts on?
I think I hear mixed messages about interest rates. There's a belief that interest rates are going to hold very steady for a little bit and may come down. But if we see inflation, which is a likely result of certain economic policies that are coming out with energy expansion and all these other kind of things happening, it's possible that we could see an increase in rates coming. I still believe in the general flexibility idea. I don't know if it's worth $80,000 a year, but I think interest rates would have to come down pretty significantly, fairly quickly, for us to recoup that difference, if that makes sense. So I would lean towards the competitive side and less to the direct side.
That was my gut. That was my gut.
That's where I'm leaning, yeah.
That was my thought as well for that main point, that rates would have to come down rather significantly, rather quickly, and all indications are that that will not be the case. They might come down a little bit, but not significantly or quickly. Inflation remains sticky at best, problematic at worst, which would mean higher rates rather than lower rates. So, yeah, I would agree with that.
You previously had 3 options. What about the other option? It's not calculated.
So the middle one I didn't calculate. It's really difficult to calculate because we don't know what's going to happen when we go into those negotiations. It's typically a little more than competitive, at least looking at our other issues. We would have our financial advisor do some more work on that between the competitive and the negotiated.
What do you guys think about that, the negotiated? You have an opinion?
The major thing we were interested in was the appetite for the direct versus the competitive. So we would look between the competitive and the negotiated.
Look at that anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, got you.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm good with that then. Okay. Okay, we good with that, council? I guess we'll do the public hearing and then we'll come back. Okay, at this time, we will open this for the public hearing. Seeing no comment, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any other discussion? Or I'll look for a vote? For a motion?
Motion.
There's
No motion? Okay.
Just a public hearing, yep.
Okay. Okay, so just move on then? We're okay to move on? Okay. Thank you, Kyle. Okay, we'll move on to item 10 then, the consent agenda. Look for a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
It's never going to get old.
Second.
Motion by Steve, second by Teddy. Jared?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I vote yes, that motion carries. Okay, move on to 11.1, review and consider a request to amend the future land use map in the Harriman City General Plan from hillside and agricultural to neighborhood 1 at 6228 West, 134th South. Clint, good to have you.
I'm just glad we're not here talking about RVs again, so.
Oh my gosh. Amen.
All right, so subject property just off of 56 West and north of 134th. This is property that has been subdivided to the west in the past 6 months or so. The Hollies Cove subdivision came in and did a rezone. Lots are underway there from what I understand. So this is a two-part request. The first part is the general plan amendment. The second part is a rezone. After those two are completed, if they get approved as proposed, the applicant will work with staff on the subdivision portion of the request, and that will come at a later date and be approved by the Planning Commission. The total site is 15.8 acres. You'll see that as we go through this, only a portion of that is included in the general plan request, so only 9.77 acres of that 15.8 acres is included to be amended from the hillside agricultural to the neighborhood 1. That allows the applicant to make a neighborhood or a subdivision with consistent sized lots. As it sits now, the density would be about 1 unit per acre. With the request, it goes up to 4. The applicant is asking for less than that, though. So, again, the request here to change from hillside agricultural to the neighborhood 1. Second part is the rezone. Currently, it sits as an A143 lot or zone, which requires a 1 acre lot size. As proposed, as it currently sits now, you could get about 15 acres there, or 15 lots thereabout. With the requested zone and a zoning condition of only 2 units per acre, the applicant will only get 27 lots. So it's about an increase of 12 lots over that with this request from what would be existing. And that's the area to be rezoned from the A143. This would be to the A110 zone. And the A110 zone is similar to what's proposed, or similar to what exists to the west. You can see the R110 zone there for Holly's Pond. And again, this A110 zone is similar in size and requirements and everything like that. This is a conceptual subdivision that the applicant is proposing. Lots vary anywhere from 0.33 to 0.66 acres. Anything over half an acre would still be able to retain some large animal rights in terms of equestrians or anything else that falls in that large animal category. And then as this went before the Planning Commission, it did get approval unanimously for both the general plan and the rezone request. I've included this just kind of to get a comparison of what's around it, how this potential subdivision would kind of mesh in with what's existing. And as you can see, the Holly's Pond that was previously approved and some of the other lots that are around it, the subdivision seems to meld well. With the subdivision sizes being from 0.33 to 0.66 acres, there still are opportunities for agricultural and equestrian uses as well. So, that being said, if there are any questions for me that I can address, I'd be glad to. Otherwise, the applicant is here if you have any questions for him.
The applicant satisfied with that zoning condition?
From my understanding, yes. 15 units per acre, yeah. That? Yeah. Sounds like he's satisfied.
So I always have to be a no on this, just because I took years to do the plan. The general plan took us years to do. I can't remember how many years. And it wasn't just colors with a crayon on a map. It was intentional to try and do what Next said. Preserve some agricultural uses in large lots. It gets a couple of half-acre lots, and they won't be horses because you won't be surrounded by that. It's really difficult to put that use in an area that everybody else is mad at you, just so you know. And then in this staff report, it says Harriman will support a mix of development patterns and strategies to help blend the look and feel of older, conventional Harriman neighborhoods and subdivisions with the newer look and feel of Harriman in more compact neighborhoods and subdivisions. I would ask, when do we ever include the mix of 1 acre lots in our city? Never. We've stopped doing it, and the argument is always because of the cost. Well, I will always land on the side of they're not making any more land. And if we never preserve any acre lots, we will eliminate any of that from our community. I hear arguments all the time, well, nobody will ever buy them. That's simply not true. It's harder to develop because it's costly. It's harder to sell them because you have to target a different market, a different group of people. But I know that if we don't preserve it or preserve an opportunity for that, that's true. It'll self-fulfill its prophecy. It will never go. But I feel like we went through the planning process so that we could preserve some of that. Old Harriman blending with some new Harriman. And so I just have a hard time just walking away from that after the years that were spent planning for it. So that's my concern with it, but I understand all of the verbiage on these staff reports. I understand the planning commissions. It's not because it's a bad development. It's not because it's not great, bigger lots and things like that. It's just that it eliminates that opportunity in our city. And I just can't, I felt like there was enough work that went into the plan that I can't just, every time something comes in front of me, change it.
Understood. Any other comments on this?
Do we have a little bigger area view?
Yeah, we don't. That's as big as I went there.
Give me just a
Expanding,
second,
so on the other side of like Rose Canyon Road, that's where Jeff Neal has, he has another subdivision over there with very similar sized lots on the west side of Rose Canyon.
The little chunk in the middle of it, for sure.
Yeah, it's that, like, kind of that whole corner section. There's a little piece that's reserved for commercial, I believe, and then everything else behind there. I'm not sure how many lots. Which one? On the west side of Rose Canyon. Yeah, it's 9 lots? 9 lots. Are you talking about Holly's Pond? Oh, okay. Okay, yeah.
Just trying to figure out. Right here, right?
So it's north of the Holiday. This is, yeah.
This right here, got it, okay. And that green is the,
It's the hillside agricultural
Oh, yeah.
residential.
instead of the neighborhood one.
I'd go back, but the slide isn't letting me. You're fine.
It seems
There's
like
a little
there's
bit
big
better
swath right
context
through
of
the
what
middle
is
there,
around
all
it.
that Agricultural zone,
There he is, and that,
all that.
and that, there's just, we're just continue to carve it out, carve it up is my
And this,
concern.
this stuff too, right? This is where the horse trail was that we.
Sherry, I get your concern absolutely right. I think we've all talked about that a lot. I think this is also neat in the community. I think there's a lack of this size of lot in our community too. I know there's a lack of 1 acre, but there's a lot of these. I think there's a lot of people in this community that would move up, if you will, or move into these. I think it's, when we're talking half-acre land right now, you're talking 500,000 right now, I think, raw land. I mean, I know, but I'm just saying, I think there's,
It's definitely more expensive for people to buy 1 acre lots, right? For sure. One of the things that I would say kind of in support of what Sherry's statement was is that we did have an area zoned for larger lots that was negotiated as part of an MDA. And because of some other things, we just took those 1 acre lots out, right? We just did that 2 weeks ago.
Even the half acres, yeah.
Yeah. And so, we definitely have a trend of eliminating those parcels, those size lots from our development plans. I just can't think of anywhere over here on that side of town where it would historically agricultural, area, and even still somewhat preserving that feel throughout part of that area. I just don't see anybody would ever build acre lots out there. Like, they would never subdivide into acre lots. We just lose that element from our community.
You'd get some flag lots back there.
Yeah, a few. Like north of Main Street over there in Old Town, right? And then, way out west out in the big parcels out there that are open. But I'm not necessarily advocating for one or the other. I'm just pointing out for consideration purposes. If we eliminate them here, I just don't see there's any other 1 acre lots except way up on the hillside that may be up here.
Non-usable.
With South Mountain,
Yeah.
that stuff. There's no promise that those won't come back 15 years from now and want smaller lots up there too, so.
Well, and same with these. It's like they'll come back in 10 years and carve up, but do we have to start with the first initial carving? Anyway.
Well, you do have that C2 zone on that north side. That's the house and the car washer strip mall that was proposed from that.
Up on Main Street, yeah.
Yeah.
We said it couldn't be a car wash.
Well, yeah, I know that, but it was refreshing. The only odd one is that R110. Everything else is the A110.
I want to make, I don't want to be inconsistent with our decision-making, right? Across the street over there, where that was developed, west of Rose Canyon Road, north of 134th out there.
Yeah, A110.
We allowed that to go in at quarter-acre lots, right? These are at least generally bigger than that. It's hard for me to say we just approved a quarter-acre lot development across the street, which was zoned differently, right? And now we're not willing to do that here, even though we are getting some, what did it say, 0.6 of, was that the largest lot size? 0.5.
0.66 was the largest.
0.66, right.
And that's conceptual, they could.
Got it, and I understand. And maybe I'd be more, I don't know if that's a possible zoning condition. I'm just theorizing here to look for some input, but maybe there's a zoning condition of there needs to be a certain number of, half acre or bigger lots or something like that. You may lose a lot to make some bigger ones or something, but it seems to me if we voted against this proposal, that we would be being inconsistent in our decision-making over here. And I don't know that that's fair to the applicant. So, again, I'm just playing devil's advocate on both sides. I'm pointing out different things to consider, but it would be hard for me to vote against it, but I could be persuaded to vote for it with some additional conditioning, so.
So currently, how many half-acre lots are conceptually in there? Because it didn't look like too many.
I didn't go through into account, I'm not exactly sure.
Count 3.
We did have a provision in our A110 ordinance, so you could get bonus density if you abutted half-acre lots up against existing half-acre lots. That seemed to be, kind of a good approach. So that there are areas that, on the east side of the subdivision, maybe that's where you put more half acres, or where they abut 1 acre lots to the west side of them, maybe that's where they put their half acre lots. There might be some consideration that way.
Yeah.
I've got a question on actual development and road placement. That road that's going to go north-south on the east side of the property towards Harriman Elementary. How does that, so to the top of this map, how does that limit access for future development in that lots there?
Not a bad plan.
You're talking about as you go north?
As you're going west towards Harriman Elementary, between his development and west.
So there is, so on this Holly's Pond, you can see.
That'd be going east.
Going
out,
east?
yeah. So going going east, my apologies.
So going east, I mean, at the top of where the subdivision is, there's potential for, that's where the road would stub into.
Okay.
Which allows access into that other area. There may be, and that just all depends on how all
How
this
the
other
other
property
developer
develops,
does it,
right?
yeah.
There probably should be and will be opportunities for road connections to the east to be made. But where he doesn't control that property, he can't really say that at this point.
So I'm gonna back up a second, because there's two separate asks here. The first one, to Sherry's point, is the general plan. So remind us what the difference is between residential 1 and agricultural residential.
So currently the general plan is hillside agricultural, which typically limits development to 0.8 units per acre. Typically you see, the zone restriction I think is an R1 or an A143, so 1 acre lots. What he's asking for is a change from the hillside agricultural, and that's typically, reading through the general plan, it's to protect sensitive lands or protect hillsides, those kinds of things. When you move into the residential 1, it opens up to still single-family zones. I mean, the smallest zone we have now is the A110, R110 zone, quarter-acre lots. And that's to, kind of satisfy that element of intermingling different lot sizes. I mean, we do have some larger lots in Harriman. We have a lot of smaller lots as well. These are kind of in the middle ground area there.
So the reason I ask is that, to Sherry's point, there's the one issue of the general plan. So I'm trying to look at the map here and look at the other areas that are in the same general plan designation. This is more or less carving out a small rectangle attached by a sliver to another R110 and then taking it over into this other much larger area that is hillside agricultural. So I understand, like, the point that you made is going into more of the zoning and the development part, but the first question is general plan.
Right.
Right, so the entire area is general planned.
So I got this map up. But if you look at all the lots in here, all the lots over here, right? These lots that are up in here, there's not a lot of 1 acre lots up there that have been developed by anybody else.
In that same color green.
In that same neighborhood 1 zone. Or general plan.
General plan.
Right, yeah. And so while I understand what you're saying, maybe that's something for a future general plan discussion, is to really carve out some areas that we would plan to be larger lots, i.e. this area north, or, back over there behind, like Old Town area or something like that. Does that make sense? And maybe we could, I don't know. But to eliminate that from here, it seems like what he's asking to develop is in harmony with what's being developed in the area around there. And that's why I'm having a hard time trying to say no to what I think is a very reasonable.
Yeah, it just says pictures there.
Right, the rest of this is still the same. So could you go to that slide? Just the general plan? Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, that one. Right, so that, I guess, I don't want to speak for you, Sherry, but I'm looking at your point and trying to think through it myself. I'm like, all right, well, she has a point, because the general plan contemplated those things that Steve was talking about, and you have all of these other homes to the, I'm assuming it's north and south, right, that are in that same general plan zone that are of those sizes. That's the general plan amendment that's being asked for.
Yes.
To carve that piece out, simply because I'm assuming it might even be a different property owner has agreed to go in on this, and they're gonna connect them by this little sliver of a road between the two. It's also kind of where we run into problems with these developments, where we're trying to stick them into a jigsaw puzzle and leaving another portion that then,
No access.
yeah, and is forced to
Is like A110 part, is that an applicable density and this hillside agricultural residential?
No, you have
No,
A1.
so it's R,
Minimum
R1 and
143?
A143.
Got it. So, which I think is right, but look at what we did over in Elk Ranch.
Well, that's what we do every time.
Well, and that's kind of Sherry's point, and I mean, my
Yeah, yeah.
frustration all these years sitting here is that we have a general plan, and I'm not saying I'm advocating one or another.
Got it.
I'm just, in general, like, what are we doing? Every time one of these comes up, how many times have I said, what does it matter? Because what does the general plan matter? I've never sat up here during one of these discussions ever and had us look at the general plan and say, because if you read the text, general plan is supposed to guide the zoning. Every time we do the opposite, we come and go, well, this is the zone we want, so we should change the general plan. So I totally understand, Sherry, and agree with you from that philosophical point of view. We always think about it backwards when we get to these decisions.
I would agree in principle absolutely with what you just said. I'm just not sure that I could advocate that it would be fair for this applicant to suddenly be the point at which we draw the line in the sand and say we're not going to do that anymore, especially when right across the street we just did it, what, a year ago?
Oh, and
it feels like a year ago.
That's kind of where I'm going, is from all the times I've sat through this, and every time I look through it, and we talk about the general plan and the flower language, et cetera, when it comes right down to it, and you're gonna hate me saying this, Sherry, but when it comes right down to it, and I've said this many times before, what does the general plan mean? Why do we even have one other than we're supposed to, because the state or county tells us you have to have a general plan, right? So we paint these pictures, these pictures
kind of our problem
and
with it
watercolors,
from
et
the-
cetera, but what actually matters is the zoning for all the reasons that you're stating.
So, how many, I think we came in at the tail end of this general plan, I believe, if the timing's right. Maybe we were in the first, even through the part of that. How many of these areas were put as placeholders or potential growth areas where we knew there was going to be growth or infill?
I don't think that, well, when I looked at it through the process, I don't look at it as placeholders.
Nothing's
It's
a placeholder.
plan.
Well, you'd still infill with 10 one-acre lots.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
Right.
it's a plan, and I guess that's the frustration always is.
Yeah, but
is-
you're sandwiching 1 acre lots between thirds and quarters and
Well,
halves.
that's called a diversity in your community. It actually states something like that, a mix. You are mixing 1 acre lots, but if you never have any, you never have any to mix, is my point. They're obviously going to be mixed in different areas. We have, we have apartment buildings next to single-family homes, or, I mean, there's a mix in the same area, right? That's just my own philosophy, and it's just that I'm just to the point where I can't just keep saying, to me, isn't a big suggestion. Or if it is, we have to stop spending so much money hiring somebody to do a general plan if we're never going to do anything that it's about.
Goes back to my point of what
We
does
should
it
just
do?
check off the box and say, here's our plan and move forward, right?
Yeah.
But, and I agree with every point that's being made here, it's just that is my feeling on it.
Yeah.
So for whatever that's worth, taking through that exercise, I have that same frustration, but then I come back down to the reality and practicality of it, right? So looking at this map that's up on the screen, if, say, that rectangle on 134th was wanting to split into 4 different lots, it'd be an easy no because of what's surrounded by it, and we can go through a whole bunch of things. I think what's difficult for us going forward, sorry, I'll move back up a little bit. If we go back to the general plan thing, to me and all the experience that I've had in those different conversations, it's more of a bigger picture sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then you drill down to these. We're through a lot of, if not all of the bigger picture general plan types of things. It's going to be these sorts of infill areas.
especially out there.
To Teddy whispered to me, I just got done, and I'll have a few more conversations lined up this next week, done telling people, if you live next to a 5 to 10 acre or larger piece that's surrounded by other homes and major roads, it's likely to be infilled with something less than 1 acre lots.
Absolutely.
Whether it's this council or another one or any others, for a myriad of reasons. And when I look at this, that's kind of what I see as well. Yep, there are some 1 acres there. There's also a hodgepodge of others that have been there for a long, long time. Consistency in these decisions around it, I get it. If this, right, so to make my rambling story short, kind of where I'm at is I'm inclined to agree that a zoning condition of 2 per acre fits with the overall intent of larger single-family lots and homes. I have a hard time not, saying no to that.
I'm with you, because I actually think that the third to bigger than, 2/3 acre lots, that's a lot. There's some 1/4 acre ones out towards the front, but preserving, 6 or 8 or 10 of those is probably not going to be coming to us. I think, to your point, in the future, they're all going to be like 110s, right? That's what most of the requests are going to be going forward, not preserving these. I actually think we're probably preserving about the largest lots we're going to get requested to preserve out there.
yeah,
We're being honest, right?
Just the cost of developing it is
Yeah.
exponential, yeah.
And the big commercial developers are going to come in and they're going to say, I got to maximize, so I'm going to put everything I can out there, right?
So again, I appreciate the dialogue and the willingness for all of us to entertain each other's thoughts and and even banter back and forth. I'm ready to make a motion if we're.
I'm supported. Let's make a motion.
with that.
I think we're all.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 2025-03, amending the general plan future land use for 9.77 acres of property located approximately 6228 west, 13400 south from hillside and agricultural residential to neighborhood 1.
Motion by Jared,
I'll second that.
second by Teddy. Do a roll call. Jared?
Yes.
Did I say Teddy?
Yeah.
Steve? Oh, my God. It's been a long day. I'm so sorry. Teddy?
Yes.
Sherry?
No.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries 4-1. Do you have any more on the rezone or just any more discussion on the rezone? Oh. Nothing to add on the rezone? Okay. Are we good to make a motion on the rezone as well then, I'm assuming, now that that's fallen in?
I'll motion to approve ordinance number 2025-04, amending the Harriman City official zoning map for 15.8 acres of property located approximately 6228 west, 13400 south from A143 agricultural single-family zone to A110 agricultural single-family with a zoning condition of 2 dwelling units per acre, maximum.
Second by Jared, second by Teddy. We'll go Steve.
Yes.
Sherry?
Sorry, I just can't. My answer's no.
You're okay.
There's
Teddy?
no need to apologize.
You don't need to apologize, yeah.
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion as well carries 4-1. Thank you for your work on this planning. Thank you. So,
I think, if I could just make a comment, Sherry, I think in situations like this in the future, I think that it would be appropriate to vote against a general plan amendment. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Because I think that to your point, the general plan should be the guiding thing. In practicality, I can see voting no for the general plan amendment and yes for the zoning change. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which is, that way you're kind of acknowledging both of those conflicting principles, right?
For sure.
Yeah, so just a comment.
Yeah, I actually thought the exact same
Yeah,
thing.
it occurred to me as I was voting, so.
okay, we appreciate everybody's time on that and discussion. Okay, we'll move to item 11.3, notice of pending ordinance related to retaining walls and building height. Mr. Sheeran, who shaved between work meeting and the general meeting, I might add. I saw him in the bathroom shaving.
I'm sure he's
And
glad
it's
you
still
shared
5
that.
o'clock.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me to present to you on this notice of pending ordinance. It's related to retaining walls and building height. Our ordinances don't have really any regulations on retaining walls, how they should be utilized, whether they should be different for residential versus commercial. And we also don't have great regulations regarding building height and how they should be applied and utilized. And this hasn't been an issue historically because Harriman has had a lot of flat land, relatively speaking. And now we're starting to get development in hillsides that are causing this to be a complication. For the retaining wall itself, I want to show you a picture. It was a neighbor adjacent to a development project, and this was sent to me by the neighbor. The neighbor hired an attorney, and she sent this to me. You can see the Wardles residence up on top of the hill, and then the new construction below the hill, and in between them, you see a significantly high retaining wall. I don't know what Blake, if you know what the retaining wall height is, but I would guess to say it's about 20 feet tall.
Holy cow.
You can see that it goes almost to the bottom of the eaves on the home construction. So the neighbor was concerned with the safety aspect, as well as when you drive up the street, you are essentially looking at the top of the roof. You can't even see the front door because the front door is sunk down so far down. And the reason why they did that is so they could build a big home on a lot that is severely sloped, both in two different directions. The goal of the pending ordinance would allow staff the time to prevent some large retaining walls to artificially change the elevation within a development. And part of that problem is artificially changing it to increase building height. And that where the calculation of how we do building height. Right now, it states that we take a low point and a high point and take the midpoint to determine elevation. That has historically been fine until you start getting into looking at retaining walls to artificially increase the height so they can increase the height of the home. So that's the purpose of the notice of pending ordinance.
Todd, can I ask us a question?
Uh-huh.
What else is the purpose of a retaining wall?
No, that's a great question. So retaining walls are great to be utilized. In fact, the city utilizes them quite often when it comes to building roadways on hillsides where we need it. If you drive down Mountain View Corridor or Redwood Road into Saratoga Springs, you can see some very large developments with some very large retaining walls.
Right at the corner down there at Port Rockwell, yeah.
Yeah, and so we're not looking at changing any requirements outside of residential zone. Our thought is, staff's thought is that retaining walls should not be used to artificially change the heights in such severe ways. Now you could have, our proposal would be you could still have retaining walls, but they would need to be stepped in some way. So that way you're not having huge drop off or huge lift ups.
So with your proposal, how would that have impacted this wall here? What would have been the height of the retaining wall?
So we don't have any specific language. Well, actually, has the Planning Commission reviewed anything yet?
No,
'Cause
so we're working through an ordinance right now. We're currently in the efforts of drafting some amendments. We've looked at it as staff a couple of times, but we haven't got to a final draft where we've taken it to the Planning Commission or even gone to a work session with them. But the intent is, as Todd was saying, is to kind of break up these large walls in residential areas to provide a little more softening as that elevation change takes place, and then, you know, the alteration of the grade of the property to increase the height of the building is another issue.
If I might, Mr. Mayor, I think
Yes, please.
what I would see specific on this is you would have seen terraces.
Mm-hmm.
It would have stepped down a little bit. One concern, having worked in a community with large retaining walls that were hitting their century mark, is they begin to fail.
Yeah.
And then who's responsible for that? That has got to be an incredibly expensive retaining wall. And to replace it later with both houses in place, who's paying, whose retaining wall is it? It's just would be nice to have some real regulations on what they are, because we do have some large retaining walls starting to pop up in the city as we move up the hillside, and I think it's just a concern we should have, not to say we're in control, but just have some basic regulations so it's clear to us and our inspectors what should be, what we're looking at.
So being in this industry, that's how I first started was concrete. This retaining wall is gonna have the exact same amount of concrete underneath as a lateral brace. And so what you see there is also underneath, maybe in a different form or different footing style, but securing that is, I mean, you gotta have some massive skill, and just that's gonna shift and break.
Yeah.
Even however much steel you put in that thing, it's gonna shift and break.
Part of the requirement, some of the issues are when you have large retaining walls, you have a potential of people falling off large retaining walls. And in most communities, they do have a height restriction on retaining walls until it steps, and then you can have another.
What about like a fencing or security on top of that as well, right?
Yeah, they can put that on top, so now
Yeah,
you're
so it's
talking
another 6 feet.
26 feet.
Yeah.
Correct.
Oof.
It helps the fence and.
Yeah, oh my gosh,
Or
right?
they walk along there doing their balance, that's a
Yeah.
little
Parkour.
sketchy.
So you can see that there's an issue potentially with public safety. There's issues with neighborhood integrity, meaning that you could have, like in this case, you have one house that's on the actual soil, and then you have another house significantly lower. So we're hoping to have a better aesthetic, ensuring equity between developers and property owners, mitigating environmental impact, and providing some clarity in our code.
How do we see that on a plan? Because your zero grade's still gonna be zero on the plan set when they submit. How are we gonna identify that they've X'd out 30 feet
Those are typically shown in a building permit or
in
something
the
like that.
laterals or in the?
Yeah, they'll have a grading plan or something that will depict that. One of the other things that we're considering, and so we can, when like a new subdivision goes in, and this is just an idea that we've had, as a new subdivision comes in, and if a developer wants to install a 20-foot tall retaining wall in their subdivision as part of their subdivision improvement, then that would be allowable in the terms that when a homeowner comes in and purchases, they can see that wall and say, okay, I don't want to live next to that, or I do want to live next to that, I want to take advantage of this, and so that's kind of.
There's some of the big retaining walls up Rose Canyon on the far west end before it gets to the high country on that right-hand side. There's some massive retaining walls of the pre-built block or precast block.
Right.
But,
My backyard in Rosecrest has a
yeah.
6 or 7 foot wall with a fence on top of it, you know.
Well, are you
So
rock
all
or
those
retaining?
neighbors.
So does my
What's
front
that?
Is it
yard.
rock or is it retaining?
Yeah, it's just rock.
It's rock,
And
yeah.
and you can see that it's moved out over
Yeah.
15, 18 years, 19 years the house has been there, right? So,
And that's not structural rock, that's just rock
no,
found
it's
on
just,
site.
yeah, it's all the rocks that probably pulled out of the ground there.
The engineering group does require, so building code requires any wall over 3 feet to have a building, or is it 4? 4 feet to have a building permit. And then, once you get above 4, the building permit requires engineering review to ensure safety. So, it has to be a stamped plan. We often have people build walls without plans, and we have to come back, and so we have a process for having them certify that wall, have an engineer certify that wall after the fact as well. So it's good to have some controls on it too, to handle the environmental and the safety, the fall concerns. But there is some engineering behind this too. And this wall, I don't know if it would have been approved this way or not.
Yeah, and this is just, we have a lot of discussion to have about this. This is just saying, we're gonna need an ordinance, and we're giving a notice that we're gonna be making one.
Yeah, so while we won't be able to fix this issue because it's already built, we can let people know when they apply for something that requires a retaining wall, that they're on notice that we're making changes, that their application is going to be put on hold during that time.
Can be subject
It's like a
And-
moratorium on that particular thing.
Exactly. The notice of it's a little bit different than a moratorium, as that you can still apply for it, but then the developer's at risk of that code changing and them needing to comply with the new change.
Okay.
Or vice versa, if we had some draft language tonight, which we don't, someone could, and there's some pretty good council direction on that language, then someone can apply under that pending change at their own risk, that the council still needs to do final approval because it needs to go through the full process of planning commission and the town council. So there's kind of two aspects to it. But because we don't have any language tonight, they're going to be put on notice that there's potential changes to the section, and buyer beware.
Nice.
So is an ordinance enough? I mean, that's what governs the building department to function properly? And then is there anything in UBC or IBC that would dictate and limit some of these heights, or?
Like Blake said, they require certain engineering, and once that engineering reviews it, they got to put a professional stamp saying that it complies with everything, it's safe. So we do have some assurances that walls that are built height should not fail in theory. That being said, we would go through and have some more specific city regulations on likely just the residential zones here in the
At
city.
least this one was probably done by a licensed contractor, other than like some rock walls throughout the city that were just stacked.
Yeah, and really the problem is
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge problem.
are the custom home builders, because they're being paid, to do construction at a cost. It's the large developers that we typically don't see as much of these issues, because they're trying to
It's
do
uniform.
what
High
is
cost.
less expensive as possible, so they can sell the home at a better, more marketable rate.
I would just add, I think it does raise an additional question that maybe not tonight, but you guys could brief us on, is, that stamped plan, the big retaining walls and draper that failed were stamped, right?
Right.
There was a disconnect between what was planned and stamped and approved, and then what actually happened during the construction, right? It didn't follow exactly the plan that was stamped and approved, right?
Right.
And so there's a question of, how does our inspection process ensure that what is happening is aligning with what was engineered?
So we require a special inspection by the design engineer at the end. So they come
They have
out
to
and
sign off that what they
designed was
said
built. And if it
actually was
wasn't,
built.
they have to show that it still will meet the safety
Or redline
requirements.
it, yeah.
Got it, okay.
That's how we're handling that one.
Okay, thank you.
With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think we're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number R04-2025, providing notice of a pending ordinance to enact and amend regulations related to retaining walls and building.
Motion by Sherry,
Second,
second by Steve. Steve?
yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, that motion carries. That brings us to the end of our general meeting tonight. Our future meetings, Planning Commission, 2 weeks on February 5th. Our next council meeting is February 12th. The Yeti hunt is ongoing right now, about every other day, right? So much fun. There was one clue that came out tonight, I think, while we were here. A lot of fun going on. I think that's everything, so I will look for a motion to
Need to return to the work meeting.
go back to work meeting. Yep.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.